So those restrictions the government announced yesterday, what difference will they make? Will they help in cutting down on the number of COVID-19 cases in this province? I'm joined by Dr. Joe Blondeau. He's a clinical microbiologist and head of clinical microbiology at Royal University Hospital in Saskatoon and at the U of S. Dr. Blondeau, welcome to the program.
Well, thanks very much for asking me to come on.
What difference, or what do you make of the announcement made by the government yesterday?
Well, the government made an announcement in regards to some additional restrictions that are designed to try and keep people apart. And when people can't stay apart, at least that sort of 6 feet or 2 meter distance, then to always be wearing a mask in order to minimize the risk that you could either be infected with or transmit the virus to susceptible individuals. And I think all of the interventions that the government is bringing in is to further impress upon people that this is a virus that is spread by close contact, and that a lot of your everyday activities are things that can actually facilitate transmission of this virus. I've said in interviews earlier in the pandemic that, the worst jobs in the country right now are to be a provincial premier or the prime minister of this country, because you have all kinds of different groups calling for all kinds of different interventions, and no one group is ever going to be satisfied with whatever decisions are made. So I think it's a delicate balancing act to try and say, what can we do in order to protect the citizens of this province and of this country, and at the same time be sensitive to the fact that people need to work and people need to feed their families, so it's a challenge, and I suspect that as we continue to move forward, if the cases continue to escalate, then we may in fact see further restrictions down the road.
Well, they certainly, now you have to wear a mask when you're in an indoor public place clear across the province. How do we know if that's making a difference?
Well, we will know if it's making a difference after a couple of weeks, 3 weeks, when we start to see how the case numbers are responding. So if the case numbers continue to go up, it means one of two things. It means that the intervention is not working, or that people are not paying attention to what they're being asked to do. And as you might readily agree, it's very, very tough to police some of these interventions, because people may do one thing when they think they're being observed and something different when they think they're not being observed. And even with the masking policy, if you observe individuals that are wearing masks, a number of people are not wearing them correctly. And that sort of negates the value of having them on. So I think what we really need is we need everybody to say, these are important interventions. They're there to protect me and my fellow citizens, and certainly members of my family, particularly vulnerable populations. And I have an important role to play in this problem, and I need to do things right.
How critical then is it to maintain that 2 meter physical distancing if you're wearing a mask?
Well, the best way to prevent contracting this virus is to stay away from people who may be shedding it. And because this virus is spread by droplet, we know that you have to be of a certain distance or closer in order for this virus to be transmitted to you. So that sort of 2 meter or 3 or 6 feet distance is designed to keep you at a safe distance, where if somebody happens to be shedding virus, it's not likely to make it to your airway, to your nose, to your mouth, etc. And what masks actually do is masks help in situations where you cannot maintain that distance. Say you're shopping in a store, the aisles are not wide enough, you happen to be in close contact with somebody else accidentally, then having that mask on protects you in the event that individual happens to be shedding the virus. And in the beginning, there was a lot of information that said, what a mask actually does is it protects somebody from being infected if you are shedding the virus. And that some of the early indications were that it may not necessarily protect the wearer. But that information has continued to evolve as more information has become available on masks. And now I think there's some very good evidence that masks not only prevent you from spreading the virus to somebody else, it actually prevents you from catching the virus from somebody else. And the rationale is, I was just going to mention that the rationale is quite simple. The masks capture these droplets which are containing the virus and prevent you then from spewing these onto somebody else.
I want to talk about the physical distancing for a moment, Dr. Blondeau, because we keep hearing about the 2 meter or 6 foot distance is sort of like that's really, really important to try to maintain that distance. But I was looking at, and I mean, listen, you've written a lot of science papers, so you, but I was looking at the Center for Evidence-Based Medicine, the University of Oxford in London, and they were talking about even the 6 foot rule may be kind of an outdated rule because this was set at a time when you can only measure larger droplets that were coming out of people's mouths. Now we can measure much smaller ones that maybe should be 9 feet or 20 feet. I mean, what do you make of that?
Well, we have known for quite some time that that there may be large, medium, and small droplets. And what we didn't know, I think, in the beginning was how far a lot of each of these different sizes of droplets may actually go. And I think 6 feet. As a matter of fact, in Europe, early in the pandemic, they were actually recommending 1 meter, so half of what we're recommending in Canada, and they subsequently updated that. So I think that what we've learned about COVID-19 is that it continues to evolve with every day that the virus is still out there, and as new evidence becomes available. And certainly, if the evidence continues to come forward that there's even smaller droplet that we're expelling smaller droplet particles. And that these are carried a little bit further, then 6 feet may not necessarily be the right distance, and maybe it needs to be further. And I do know that that there are some that are now advocating that 3 meters might be a better number, or 9 feet if you're trying to keep it into both the imperial and the metric system. And I think that really needs to be dictated by science. And right now we're still only 10 months into this pandemic. And we're still learning something new about this virus every day.
And about the vaccine, there was a bombshell today of news from AstraZeneca saying that they may have had some manufacturing problems that may delay the release of what sounded like a promising vaccine. So it looks like we're back to 2 major drug makers, Pfizer and Moderna. But what does this point to you as far as how safe these vaccines are from what you've know of them that may be released very soon, especially the Pfizer one?
I think that we have to trust that the processes for manufacturing these vaccines are safe. The mere fact that this error was identified and it was brought forward suggests that the right quality control measures are put in place in order to determine that something was not right. It was detected and it was reported, and then the impact on the study population is now being evaluated. What it does, in my opinion, is it probably sets back the manufacturer of that particular or the development of that particular vaccine by a period of time, which is a bit unfortunate. And the reason why I say that is that when you start getting into subset analysis, that means if you start breaking down the patient populations in vaccine trials into, say, the elderly or to the middle-aged or to the younger or whatever the case may be, every time you cut the data with a subset, then you have a smaller number to work with. And the smaller the numbers, the harder it is to make meaningful relationships out of it. And so I think what it means for AstraZeneca is that they're probably going to have to go back to the drawing board. They're probably going to have to say, okay, how many more patients now do we have to enroll, making sure that they've had the right concentration or dosage of the vaccine, and in what subset populations in order to make sure that we meet the regulatory requirements in order to have this vaccine approved and put into clinical use. It is a setback because keeping in mind that, we have billions of people in the world, not millions, but billions of people in the world. And once vaccines become available, there's going to be a huge demand by certainly every country in the world in order to try and access dosages of those vaccines for their citizens and their broader populations. So it doesn't do anybody any good to have these bumps in the road.
There seems to be some bumps along the road. And I just want to go back to the other comment. You said we're only 10 months into this pandemic. That's the scientist in you talking, I guess, because it feels like a lifetime to us all. But we're muddling through it as best we can.
Well, if you look at the last great pandemic that the world has seen, it was the Spanish flu pandemic between the years of 1918 and 1920. So it was not quite 2 years. And in many ways, what we're seeing with COVID-19 is paralleling some of the developments that occurred with the flu pandemic over 100 years ago. And so 10 months is partway through it. For this time, Costa, which I think is really encouraging, is that our ability for diagnostics, our ability to support patients that have more advanced disease or are critically ill, as we heard from Dr. Masra, is much, much more advanced than it ever was, not only 100 years ago, but even 20 or 30 years ago. So that's one thing. The other thing is that our ability to manufacture a vaccine in the timelines that the manufacturers have been challenged with is nothing short of amazing. Now, having said that, we do want to make sure that the vaccine developments or drug developments or whatever interventions are going to come for dealing with COVID-19 patients follow all the safe practices that are required in order to produce a safe medicine. And that would probably mean that a lot of people are going to spend a lot of long nights reviewing documents to make sure that all of the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. And that everything was done in accordance with good practices in order to make sure that these medicines will be safe. But our ability to do that now, our ability for international collaboration is unparalleled during this pandemic.
Dr. Blondeau, thank you so much for spending some of your evening with us and explaining some of this. Have a nice night.
Thank you so very much for asking me. You as well. Thank you.